Well, this is part two of Women of the Word Preacher Conversation. The first part, it was going real good, and then technical difficulty confronted us, but we're here. We're here.
Yeah. Indeed, indeed.
Okay, well, thank you, Sister Mikki Taylor, and I want you to know how much I appreciate you and appreciate what you do for the kingdom and for the church. You are certainly a gift, and a gift from God, a gift to our brotherhood. And so my hat is off to you. I really want to thank you for what you do and who you are.
Well, thank you. I am so honored to serve my brother and to link arms and aims in the journey toward heaven. I tell you, I just get beside myself sometimes. In fact, I always say now these days I sleep fast. I sleep fast, yes.
Now, what does that mean when you say you sleep fast? What does that mean?
It means that I really have to get it done and get back up and go to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, yeah, I had to sleep. No moss growing under my feet.
Well, I was listening to a podcast with Magic Johnson, and Magic Johnson made the statement that he goes to bed early, but he goes to bed early and he gets up early.
Yeah.
Because while folk are sleeping is when he makes money, So do you find that to be true? Is that the best time to get started?
Oh, it is. It is. And so I wake up anywhere between 4:30 and 5:30. And I'm ready to go. I have my meditation time, I have my study time, and I'm working before the sun comes up. Yeah, because also that's when, first of all, you have that quiet time. And if you look at God as your chief operating officer, that's a time when the officer is talking to you. That's a time when you get your revelations. That's when even sometimes I'll wake up during the night and it's like, oh, you got to go write that down because it won't come back. You got to grasp it while it's passing through. And so then so by the time I'm connecting with other people, and sometimes I'm on 2 different time zones, I'm on the East Coast time and the West Coast time. By the time I start hearing the voices of other people, I've already set my intention for the day. I already know what's necessary. I'm really clear and I don't feel like I'm trying to play catch up. So that's important to me.
Well, I can really relate to what you said about putting it on paper or putting it down when it comes to you. I'm up all the time during the night. A good sermon thought will come to me.
Yeah.
And I just got to get up from the side of the bed and type it in my phone and that kind of thing and go back to it. Because once you lose a thought, the thought is lost, Oh,
yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't always come back. It doesn't always come back to you and everything.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's valuable. And you really do have to be obedient to it because it's given to you for a reason. And if you don't get up and write it, and when I have had that happen to me, and then I've tried to recollect it in the morning, and no, just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, I think we ended up talking about spiritual matters. Let me back up and say what you shared in the first part of the podcast was so valuable, and especially with this being February being Black History Month. Mm-hmm. You have made Black history. I mean, you're part of we talk about it in the past, but you are making Black history, and years from now, people will talk about Mikki Taylor. They will talk about the doors that you open and how people open doors for you. So one of the things I want to do, I'm going to share that first part this month during Black History Month because I think it'll fit. And this segment I'm going to share with the preacher conversation part, Women of the Word. So we're going to make it a two-part story. But I wanted to ask, who opened doors for you? And then what kind of doors, to keep you from having to mention names unless you feel comfortable. First of all, who opened doors for you? I think you probably feel comfortable answering that. But the second question is, what kind of doors are you opening for other people?
So, you know, I always say that I didn't have to look far for a role model or an advocate because I had that at home. And so my mother opened doors for me, certainly my dad, but my mother really opened doors for me as a child. And I will never forget that because she showed me the achievable possibilities. And there was no dream that we as children would pursue as the only thing she didn't make provision for were quitters, because quitting was not an option. Mm-hmm. And so that, in fact, when I told my mother when it was time to graduate high school, that they could keep the money that they had saved for me to go to college because I wouldn't need that to do what I was going to do, my mother didn't stand in the way. Mm-hmm. And she helped me get into the business. And I was glad that she had some territory for that, because when my mother went to Howard, my grandmother, when Sarah Vaughn, who my mother worked for all those years, when her team tapped my mother to come and work for her, my mother left Howard and my grandmother didn't stand in her way. And so that was the first door opening, and you know, making connections for me to be able to pursue my dreams. There have been many wisdom keepers and mentors along the way. Certainly Susan Taylor hiring me without any experience in publishing and only a vision, hiring me at Essence back in 1980. People like when I did my first book, you know, certainly Oprah Winfrey and Halle Berry and Samuel Jackson's wife, director LaTanya Richardson Jackson, and the list goes on of women who came to share their wisdom in that first book. And you know, every book from then on, even working with Mrs. Obama. I remember working with her on a shoot in 2006. Little did I know that years later, God would bring us together and I would capture covers and even go on to do a book about her that will go down in history as one of two Black writers, I want to say, to do a book about her. And mine was from working with her firsthand. So there are always people that God sends to open doors for you. Now, you have to be a good steward of blessings, not only your ability, but blessings. And so for me, if I look back over my career, I thank God that I had the wisdom to use the agency that I had to give people an opportunity in the business, models, creative artists, makeup artists, hairstylists, speakers, production people, the list goes on, and to do those things that hadn't been done before because of that. Even when, you know, for 9 years, I scripted the Essence Black Women in Hollywood Awards, and really to have the ability to say, well, it's time for us to honor this one and to honor that one. When we honored Misty Copeland, you know, I reached out to Mrs. Obama to write, you know, a letter to her because she couldn't be there, but at least to give her flowers. I brought different people together, like director James Cameron, director of Avatar and Titanic, to be a presenter. There's so many years we present to them, or we were in Hollywood working in roles where we weren't put on the pedestal, if you will. I brought Emma Stone, actress Emma Stone, actress Amy Adams, or Richard Roundtree, Lawrence Fishburne, you name it, people together who might not meet, open doors, making a connection. And I'm still doing that. I'm doing that with interns, or doing that with young people who I mentor, doing that with people who I coach into finding their North Star. Because there is a scripture where, first of all, the Bible said, don't despise the day of small beginnings. We all start out somewhere. Everything we have, God has given it to us. And it also, you know, just talks about reciprocation, being a blessing. And so I always want to find myself in that space, calling those things that be not as though they were, because Who gets to decide but God?
Yeah, yeah. Now you mentioned all these names, and one of the thoughts that ran through my mind is when you met these people for the first time, Obama, Richard Roundtree, Samuel Jackson's wife, and everything. When you met them for the first time, were you starstruck by them? And because now the reason I'm asking that, you and I, we know each other. So I'm kind of teasing it in a way. I think some people get starstruck when they come into your presence, but when you met these people, were you first starstruck when you met them?
Not any of the people that I named, because they all had a story to tell. They all had journeys. In the early days, when I first started out, maybe like 2 years into the business, I'll never forget, I was working with Diana Ross, and I had always admired her, and I was a little starstruck. I was nervous. And I'll never forget the first time on this cover shoot, I was putting the shoulder pads in the garment backwards. That's just how nervous I was. And I thought, oh gosh, this is an epic fail. This is never going to work. And at that time, not everybody loves you. Let's face it. Your light shines, but it's not on you to dim your light. They just have to wear shades because it's God's light, really. Yeah. And I'll never forget, I was sent to the back room to work with the accessories and stuff, and told to just stay there. And I will never forget, she sent Suzanne DePass, who later went on to write The Wiz and Lady Sings the Blues and what have you. She sent Suzanne DePass down to hire me. She said, Miss Ross wants you to come and work for her. And I was blown away. And I worked for her, while still holding my job at Essence. And I would go up to the house. I met the girls, her mother, just a loving, normal family, if you will. And so I soon learned that the greater mission was to illuminate the gifts that we have in us. So when anytime I bring celebrities, so to speak, or women with celebrity, as I call it, because there are a lot of us who have journeys that the public don't know on a first name basis. Journeys are no less valid. Anytime I bring women together, whether it's an Oprah or Jill Scott or the late Nancy Wilson or what have you, when I'm working on something, it's because they have a story to tell. It's not because they're a celebrity.
Okay. Well, let me say this. You've been around celebrities, but you are a role model. And I'm sure people have told you that. I have a daughter who works in fashion merchandising. And one of the reasons she went into that field is because of an older lady to her, but she was a young adult at the time in our church here in Hopewell. And my daughter looked up to her, and she was a role model. And her field was fashion merchandising. So my daughter Rebecca just imitated her, respected her. So who are some church leaders or members who are significant in your life? I know we got to talk about Dr. Lawton, okay?
Oh my gosh,
so
yes.
Let's start with him, and then maybe who are some other people who have been influential in your life, and maybe church leaders, church members who have been role models to you?
Well, I certainly wouldn't be where I am in the journey if it wasn't for Dr. Lawton. Dr. Lawton planted so many seeds in me that, that I'll tend forever, make sure that they're blooming and thriving. And he was a great teacher. He was a great mentor. He exhibited the fruits of the Spirit in great measure. Sister Lawton was, with her humble, meek spirit and all the programs, certainly, that she gave birth to, some of them which I am continuing today. And still, while she was holding down a job in the airlines, doing all this in service to Christ. There have been so many she-roles that I've met along the way. Sister Doris Dansby. Oh gosh, there's a a conqueror in heels, if you will. I could, Sister Reva, Sister Reva White, gosh, this is just, Dr. F.W. Washington's wife. I remember I spoke at one of her Ladies' Day, and just that weekend with her and her spiritual etiquette, her role as a mother and a wife, and that the power that she walked in, but yet she didn't wield it in the way that secular women wield it. So I've been hunting and gathering, if you will, throughout these 30-some years in Christ, because there are so many models of the Word of God in my space at any given time.
Well,
I can't leave out Sister Becky Davis. Wow, well, there's a Proverbs 31 woman on so many levels. And I would never forget, because I worked with the Disney Dreamers Academy with Steve Harvey for like 15 years or whatever. And I remember bringing Becky Davis in because I knew that she had to teach these young dreamers what it meant to be an entrepreneur, to take agency over the gifts that God has given you and to multiply them. So yeah, Becky Davis just continues to inspire me.
Well, one of the reasons I asked is because in Churches of Christ, we sometimes operate in a vacuum. We know each other, but folk outside of our faith fellowship may not know us unless it's like through secular work, like what you do. So one thing I ask is because I want names to be mentioned so that when people who are not part of our fellowship can hear these names and know that there are gifted people in our brotherhood. We just may be under the radar, so to speak, or in a vacuum. So I appreciate you sharing that. Let's talk about church for a moment. You were baptized in the 80s. I think you said about 84.
84.
And before that, you were Catholic. Okay.
Yes.
When you look back from 84 to now, of course, the church has changed. And I've asked everybody this question. And of course, theoretically, we'll say that Christ is the head of the church and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. We know that's in the Bible, all that. But how would you describe, Sister Taylor, the current state of the church, pro and con, good and bad, the current state from a sister's perspective who is involved in your local church? You're involved in the brotherhood. We know you and you know us. So from your perspective, how do you see the current state of the church?
So if I look at the pros, I think from the sisterhood perspective, sisters are doing it. They're the greatest of all times in terms of fellowship, connecting with one another, linking arms and aims in service to God, and tirelessly working and advocating for the truth. And as the devil is going to new levels, so are we. And that's a wonderful thing to behold. Our classes are more fruitful, our fellowship, our messaging, our programming, our gatherings are quite a force to reckon with. On the con side, if there's such a con side, I think that what is necessary, and this is not in the Church of Christ across the board, but there are congregations that I think have to work harder at managing their relevancy to younger generations. And that's critical, because if we understand, the world that they are inheriting, then we understand that we are the necessary to protect them, to inform them, to edify them, to exhort them, because they're up against the odds. They're up against the normalcy of sin, there are so many disparities where they, in these uncertain times, they are othered, so to speak, and the devil would have them conform when they are created to transform. But this is what they're up against, and if we're not careful, it will become the cloud that captures their attention.
Yeah, it's a different world. I mean, we're probably in the baby boomer generation, and the millennials now, and the Gen Z, I guess they're called. Right. They see things differently. I mean, it's my truth. It's it's no absolute truth. And church is not as important to them as it probably is or was to us. So how do you minister to a young woman who lives in this worldview, and especially with the pandemic? I mean, the pandemic just changed things. In-person worship is an option now, or virtual worship is an option, and some people choose that. What advice would you give to a young woman about church, about her relationship with the Lord? And I kind of put those two together. All right.
So I think it's on us. The Bible says the older women should teach the younger women. And so I look at that older as seasoned, not chronologically. Mm-hmm. And I think that the first thing you have to do is raise their awareness. And you also have to be a good listener. A lot of times we talk when we should listen. And so you have to have a sensitivity to listening. Jesus had a sensitivity to listening. If you look at when they brought him the woman to be stoned, he listened. And then he wrote on the ground. So you have to be a good listener. You have to raise their awareness of who they are, because their identity is at stake. Their soul's purpose is at stake. And it's not what you went through, it's what they are experiencing right now, and how you can make the word of God relevant to where they are right now. I had a young woman in the industry say to me that she was looking for a church because she didn't want a fear-based religion. Well, I had to understand what she meant by fear-based. And I understood that her relationship with God was a series of do's and don'ts, that she didn't have a relationship with him as father, that she didn't have a relationship with him. I could go down the list of his 32 names. So there's room for education. And like the eunuch attached himself to Philip, you got to attach yourself to somebody.
Yeah.
One of the things we're doing with the New Member Connect ministry is that saints are going to be assigned to new members. So they're not floating out there alone. And so, this is the work. And you have to meet them where they are in order to transport them to where they need to be. And you can't close the gap without having some skin in the game, as they say.
Yeah. And skin in the game. And then I hear the word transparency being used. Being authentic, they like to hear your story,
Right.
I remember when I was working on my dissertation, which was developing a young adult ministry. That was the my dissertation title, Developing a Young Adult Ministry at the East End Church in Memphis. And one of the things I learned is when I would tell them my story before Christ, or my prodigal son years, oh man, they were like on the edge of their seats. I mean, they love to hear that there was a past before I became Brother Crusoe, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Look, you can't tell somebody how to be a conqueror or help build a conqueror if you don't tell them what you had to overcome.
Yeah.
You know you didn't arrive here like this. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been no need for Jesus. Well, so you got to come with it, as they say. You got to come with it.
Yeah.
And so, you got to tell them.
Yeah.
It wasn't cute. It wasn't pretty. Don't let the grace fool you. Don't know there's no halos.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're right on point when you said older women is not just chronological age, but season.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Is there a difficulty with bridging the gap between the seasoned and the younger? I mean, is there a barrier or hurdle that needs to be overcome? How do we do that?
I think that it takes a willing vessel. It takes a willing vessel. So, one of the things, you have to be an effective steward of your energy. Mm-hmm. Now, we could all say, oh, I just don't have time, or I'm tired, or there's only so many hours in the day. Well, what's your priority? What's your priority? The Bible says that they shall rest from their labors. If you haven't had any labors, what are you resting from? Mm-hmm. So you have to, again, I can't say it enough, meet young women where they are. No shock value. She tells you, look, I'm not trying to be with anybody right now. I'm at college, and sometimes we girls jump off. I'm keeping it real. Yeah. Sometimes we're with the fellas, and sometimes we're with one another because we don't trust nobody. You can have no shock value for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because sin is sin.
Yeah.
You don't get to decide the level, which is intolerable.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So in order to talk to her about being pure and holy, you got to first hear what she likes about being impure and unholy.
All right. Okay.
Shock value. No shock value.
All right. All right. All right.
Now, I know you didn't ask for all that, but we're having an honest conversation.
Yeah, well, I guess I did ask for all of that. Okay. Yeah. And, no, and you keep it real. You keep it real. Yeah. Well, I'm sure that because you're so involved and with meeting people in the secular world, they notice something different about MIKKI Taylor. I mean, they notice something different. There's something different about you. Even among the sanctified, there's something different about you. How do you handle that? Do you take that as a compliment or criticism? Do you feel awkward at any time, or as an opportunity to share what you believe?
I think I never feel awkward about it, because I have learned to accept what God has done. And sometimes, and what I have learned to do, I always tell the women, if you have trouble accepting compliments, just look at it this way: they're bragging on God, and just say thank you on his behalf, because he can handle it. So I've learned to say thank you on his behalf. And I've learned to just, tell the truth, be authentic, because you never know what somebody stands in need of. I have learned even simple things. When I ask somebody how they're doing, I really am asking them how they're doing. Most people ask you how you're doing, and they go on to keep on talking before you get to answer. You could say, oh, I'm just sinking over here. And they would say, oh, that's good, you look great, because they didn't hear you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so you have to make time for people. And I think that takes a certain humility. Mm-hmm. I think that takes a love for people. Mm-hmm. And if people, Oprah taught me something a long time ago. She said, people may not remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. Yeah. And so one of the things that I'm very grateful for is that from New York to Hollywood, from France to whatever, is that MIKKI Taylor has always made people feel valued. Yeah. Feel good. She's not, there are folks that I have worked with, they won't stop and take a picture with anybody. No, yes, come on, let's get this selfie. They ask me for an autograph, and I laugh. I say it's not worth anything unless it's on a check. Well, but I mean, just that real, authentic self. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, let's close out with this. It may not be current by the time that this is, but in Memphis, a young man was murdered by 5 policemen. And what were your first thoughts when you heard that? How did that make you feel, hearing about this inhumane? And did you see the video? And if you did, How did that make you feel? How did it make you feel when you heard about it?
So when I heard about the murder of Tyre Nichols, I was devastated. In fact, that is Webster won't really help me define how I continue to feel. I could only watch the first moments of the video because I was in pain. I was in pain as a Christian. I was in pain as a mother. I was in pain as a human being. And I can't say I don't know what time it is, because the Bible has said so ever more clearer than any headline newspaper. But it is something daunting to witness it, to witness that our brothers in the skin could beat another brother to death, that they could prop him up without any care for his heartbeats. And I don't understand that any more than I don't understand how in certain communities we're not safe from ourselves, because we're people who were brought here, thrown in the belly of a ship, not even speaking the same languages, and we nurtured one another. We found a way to do that. And after all that we've had to overcome, why are we here? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I opened the book on that, and then I close it.
Yeah.
I open the book on it again, and then I close it, because there's a list of names. I remember talking with Trayvon Martin's mother, and you know, Sabrina said to me, and she said, I didn't ask for this.
Yeah.
Didn't ask for this fame, didn't ask for this purpose. It was handed to me. You know, I've been with the mothers of Eric Garner and different ones, and there are no words to describe the pain of that.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. I can feel you in your expression that, and it is sad and tragic, and it just keeps happening over and over again. It doesn't matter whether it's black cop or white cop. The fact that it happens is troubling. And
troubling.
We make a statement like the whole world needs Jesus, but we take that, it's deeper than that. They really do need Christ, you know. If Christ was the center of their life. Yeah. Well, so Taylor, is there anything else you would like to share that we didn't share? Let me get this in before you do, though. You remember Dr. Lawton's birthday party last year, and you introduced me, and when you got through with that introduction, I could have ran for president, you know. It's just like, who is she talking about? Is that really me? I really wish my wife had been there to hear all of those words. So, but is there anything else that you would like to share that you didn't get a chance to share before we close out?
I think what I would just say to us, and, I asked a client this yesterday, and, I said, is faith a force or a belief or both? And I think we have to keep checking that barometer to know where we are. Along those lines, we have to watch our internal conversations and who we are first and foremost, because the Bible said God looks at the inward parts. And then finally, in these most egregious of times, I think that Proverbs 4:23 is a great banner of all times. It says, guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Everything that we do proceeds from how we think. And so we have to put that point guard on our minds and make sure that those internal conversations reflect the truth of who God is and who we are in him.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. This has been so good. I couldn't wait for this interview. All right. As I said, I'm going to show part one during the month of February during Black History Month, because I do want to say you are part of Black history, and we should honor that. You mentioned you've written books. You tell us about your books, and then tell us a little bit more about what you're going to do with the NEWARK website for women as well. Okay.
So I've written 4 books. My first book, Your Ultimate Path to Inner and Outer Beauty, was published by Ballantine years ago. My second book, Commander and Chic, Every Woman's Guide to Managing Her Style Like a First Lady, was published by Simon & Schuster. That deals with my work with Mrs. Obama. Then Editor in Chic, your Guide to Being Your Most Empowered Self, which was also published by Simon & Schuster in 2018. And then February 2021, my first Audible original was published by Audible, and it's called Force of Beauty. And it really deals with, it's my coming of age opus in the city of Newark, and how I, became an advocate after witnessing the rising glamour, truth, and authenticity of the culture. And so those are the 4 books that I published. And then certainly in the documentary space, looking to tell our stories across the board, from our strengths, our complexities, our contributions to this country, some of the things that are still taking place in this country that we need to question and we need to understand. For example, if you look at the subject of plantations, I worked summer before last in what's known as Cancer Alley in Louisiana, just looking at, Plantation Row. And I'll never forget, I was down there filming at the same time that Will Smith was filming the current movie that he has out called Emancipation. But if you look at the number of operating plantations in the US and the number of Black people who still work on them, and what's happening in those descendant communities. And so, I go back to that: no stone unturned, no moss growing under my feet. One day there'll be a rest from my labors, but on this watch.
Yeah. And your books, they can be purchased on Amazon?
So on Amazon, and the Audible original can be purchased on audible.com.
Okay. And the documentary now, and you're going to do something on the website. Did you call it?
Yes. So on the website, I'm sorry. So we are establishing a women's room, if you will, on the website, and there'll be essays and Q&A and things that we should know. And we're going to problem solve. We're going to talk about measurable spiritual success and all of that. We have a great marketing team. We have a great team of young if you will, program directors who I'll be working with to make sure that it's most up to date in its content, and that there's content coming from everywhere, books to read, things we should know. And it's going to be a destination resource for women everywhere.
Well, thank you, Sister MIKKI Taylor. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for sharing yourself. And the world is a better place.
Oh, well, I'm just honored to serve. Thank you, my brother. Thank you for this time. I could talk to you on air. We have such powerful conversations, and
all right.
I know they're necessary.
They are necessary, and I hope this is somewhat unique. I don't like duplicating what other people are doing.
No, not.
But but then I thought about it. There's McDonald's, there's Burger King, there's Jack in the Box. They all do the same thing, We're not in competition with anybody, but I just think, as I said earlier, in our brotherhood, in our faith fellowship, there's a vacuum sometimes. And but I think that people should appreciate the gifts that we have. But and those gifts have to be shared on a broader basis. And so that's one of the purposes. And it's just right to have a piece, a component where our sisters can express. Of course, in Churches of Christ, our sisters are not pulpit preachers, but that does not mean that they do not have gifts that can be offered and presented in the kingdom. So I'm hoping this is one way to be inclusive in everything.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Looking forward to it. Looking.
Right. Well, say hello to everyone for us, and God bless you, and thank you again.
I sure will. You do the same. Thank you. You too.
All righty. Bye now.